Thank you very much, Bo. And it is not because I want to disappear, it is because I have to go back to the event of the World Water Week and to the reception of your king. Well, that's, you know, something you have to be on time. But thank you very much, Daniel, for your very, very warm words of welcome. Thank you also very much, Bo, for having the opportunity to present technology perspectives here today. And I think what is also very important, that is that I'm here because of that reason, but also because of the World Water Week. And I think the fact that IEA, in my person, was invited to be at World Water Week underlines the importance of the relationship between water and energy. It's been recognized. And this is something that is extremely important, because it's not about silos. This is energy, this is fossil energy, this is renewables, and they have to work together. It's about more. And the more has to do with climate, has to do with technology, has to do with water, and has to do with policy. And I would like to make a few comments on all these issues during my speech. Now, last time I was here with the help of Marcus Racker, who was in those days lead author of the Energy Technology Perspectives. I'm glad to see him back here. Today I have Jean-François Gagné. And Jean-François, he is coming from Canada. He's now with us and is heading the Energy Technology Division. And I'm glad that I have him here because I want him to know more about you, and I want you to know more about him, because here is your entry to the International Energy Agency when it comes down to technology. So please get to know him. It's a great pleasure to be here, to be back in Stockholm, to take you through Energy Technology Perspective 2014. And today I want to share with you some of the global perspectives found in this publication, but I would also like to highlight some key aspects and messages that I find important for Sweden. Now, the analysis in ETP 2014 offers a comprehensive long-term view of energy system trends and technologies, but also shows us what we need to do today to shape the future. But in the face of rapidly growing demand and the increasingly urgent threat of climate change, we are continuing to at most, respond to the energy system as it evolves, rather than actively managing its transformation in a holistic way. And that's actually my first point. And in fact, nothing short of a revolution is needed in the global energy system if we are to achieve our goals of building a secure, economic and sustainable energy system compatible with meeting global climate goals. Now, ETP shows us it can be done. It can be done. But to be effective, the analysis must be used. It must be used by people like you, decision makers and leaders in government and the energy sector, because otherwise it will be impossible to deliver the needed change. Now, let me illustrate our challenge by drawing your attention to a troubling fact. And while global energy demand has grown, the carbon intensity of energy production has stayed the same, resulting in increasingly high emissions. And understandably, different priorities have meant that while carbon intensity has fallen in some countries, quite low in Sweden and the Nordic region more generally, more broadly, in many regions a focus on the economic growth has seen a rapid expansion of carbon-intensive fuels led by coal. Now, ETP shows us the change in direction we must take by looking at three main policy scenarios. These policy scenarios are not new. We did the same in 2014. Huh, Marcus? These policy scenarios are the same. And the 6-degree scenario, or 6DS, is largely an extension of current trends with catastrophic consequences. The 4-degree scenario, 4DS, takes into account recent pledges made by governments to limit emissions and to step up efforts to improve energy efficiency. But it also shows that these are not enough to prevent serious climate impacts. And finally, there is the 2-degree scenario, or 2DS, and it's the main focus of ETP 2014, and it describes an energy system consistent with limiting the increase in global temperature to 2 degrees Celsius, while meeting the world's burgeoning demand for energy. And as I mentioned, the scenarios are not new for ETP. Now, globally, ETP 2014's 2DS confirms that global population and economic growth can be decoupled from energy demand, even for oil. And also analyzed through the lens of climate, this has profound benefits for energy security and the global economy. Energy efficiency. It's said more than once before, energy efficiency remains the largest contributor to emissions reductions. But it alone will not enable us to meet these targets. It must be combined with other options. And some are commercially available today, others still need further development. And when we look at the changes needed to transform the global energy system, while this means higher investments, that's true, the costs are far outweighed by the benefits. And an additional accumulated $44 trillion in extra investment in decarbonization to 2050 is set to deliver $115 trillion in savings, principally from lower fuel costs. Additionally, supporting clean energy industries that can enable this transformation creates sustainable growth opportunities in those areas that have embraced the change. But the higher upfront costs of low carbon technologies make financing a key challenge. And while long-term cost effectiveness is demonstrated, the current financing approaches do not work in all cases. Policy uncertainty can have an even greater impact on the deployment of such technologies. So it's up to policymakers, industry, and financial institutions to work together to design the right incentives and break away from the more typical short-term thinking to deliver the long-term vision and, of course, the long-term results. Well, as mentioned, every year we do a tracking clean energy progress report, and we presented at the Clean Energy Ministerial. This one we presented in Seoul this year, and it's not encouraging. And you can see it. It really paints a rather bleak picture. It's only renewable power that is really green, and for the rest, well, it's not there. And renewables, yes, they are on track, but we need progress right across the board. And the longer we wait to transform our energy system, the more expensive it will get. And the strange thing is, dear friends, that the world is not short of options. Technology is not short of options. It's short of action. Now, adapting the electricity system. And electricity is the highlight of ETP 2014. Adapting the electricity system is something we must get right, especially as in our 2DS scenario, it is set to overtake oil and become the largest energy carrier in the system by 2050. And that is why we have focused our analysis in ETP 2014 on harnessing electricity's potential. Overall electricity demand grows in all scenarios, from 80% to 130%. And so does its share of overall energy demand from 17% in 2011 to 25% in 2015. And in fact, the 2DS is the one scenario where we see demand growth somewhat limited, as it is moderated by enhanced efficiency gains. But we must actively manage the growth of electricity if we are to meet our goals for an economic, secure, and carbon future. Now today, electricity generation consumes nearly 40% of global primary energy and produces 40% of global emission. Well, it's clear. This level of emissions intensity is unsustainable. But in the 2DS, in addition to demand growth being limited by efficiency gains, carbon intensity is slashed by the use of renewables and other forms of low carbon generation, including nuclear. So while the power sector will consume around 50% of primary energy in 2050, it should only contribute around 5% of global emissions. And this is, of course, a huge challenge to achieve. So what must we do? Globally, nearly 70% of electricity is today generated from fossil fuels, and just 20% come from renewables. So achieve the 2DS, we need to see these shares completely reversed. And this will require reliable renewable generation, wind, solar, to grow its share to around 30%, becoming the largest segment in the generation mix by 2015. And as such, new operating paradigms will be required to operate the electricity system and, of course, increase flexibility. But despite global implications, electricity system development must be addressed at a regional and national level. And development patterns will differ significantly between economies. You know, most OECD countries are seeing modest growth in electricity demand, and therefore must address the challenge to maintain the reliability of aging infrastructure in markets with low revenue growth. And this will have important consequences for utility companies. Non-OECD countries, non-OECD regions are seeing much higher growth, and the challenge here is managing large investments and to move directly to best-in-class technologies. Well, for instance, Indian electricity demand is projected to grow threefold to 2050. And meeting this in a sustainable way makes for an interesting case study in this year's ETP. And India really is to be commended for its ambitious plans for low carbon generation. So, what actions can the Nordic region, and Sweden in particular, take? Last year, we worked closely with Nordic energy research and leading research institutes to produce Nordic energy technology perspectives. And it identifies how the Nordic region cannot just meet 2 degrees goals, but achieve carbon neutrality in its energy system by 2050. And this implies big changes, including a 10-fold increase in wind generation, an end to all use of coal, and significant electrification of transport. So while this Nordic ETP 2013 highlighted that many short-term emissions reductions will come from improved energy efficiency, it also outlined longer-term policies for the region and highlighted the need to promote long-term solutions such as carbon capture and storage, or maybe even better carbon capture and use and then storage the rest. Now, we are very pleased that the Council of Energy Ministers is supporting the production of an updated Nordic ETP in 2016. That will be one of the works that Jean-François and his team are going to work on. Now, in the meantime, I would like to focus on a few key technologies we studied this year and that are of interest to the Nordic region and especially to Sweden. And let me start by discussing the potential role of nuclear energy. I mentioned already nuclear. I know there is a debate in Sweden regarding its future, and such debates are important and necessary for any country, and we are seeing a number of them across the globe. And they are one of the reasons we are updating our nuclear technology roadmap and are also providing a focused discussion on the nuclear sector in World Energy Outlook that will be published later this year. But let me say that while we have somewhat revised down the role we see nuclear playing in our 2DS, it remains an important technology, providing around 17% of global electricity in 2050. And we see it being particularly important for growing economies. And yes, a clean energy system without nuclear, it's possible, but it's likely to be much more expensive. And specifically for the Nordic region, it would result in higher wholesale electricity prices and reduced scope for power exports. So it's encouraging to see Sweden leading the charge on some of the remaining hurdles to nuclear energy deployment, notably through your efforts to complete the deep geological disposal site in Forsmark, which I found very impressive when I last visited in June 2010. Now, let me touch on variable renewables and electricity. And you know, dear friends, a system-wide approach will be needed if we are to successfully deploy higher shares of variable renewables. Options exist. It's not about technology. Technology exists. And I'd like to comment on two in particular. And first is gas. Gas generation can provide baseload supply, but it will require CCS if it is to be considered a low-carbon option in the medium to long term. But gas can also support the integration of variable renewables through the provision of capacity and system services. And the second is energy storage. And here, a number of technologies offer options for supporting variable renewables. So, with all the excitement globally about battery technologies, we took a detailed look at storage technologies this year, ranging from gigawatt-scale pumped hydro to the battery in world-mine foam. And while pumped hydro and the strategic use of hydro generation as we already see in Nord Pool, can offer great flexibility in many applications, most storage technologies, such as batteries, don't yet compete with other flexibility options. So while we think battery technology can be a very important contributor, costs need to fall dramatically before we see widespread deployment of large-scale battery facilities. But of course, there's also another side, and that's the demand side of electricity. And decarbonization of electricity has spillover effects in all end-user sectors, and the use of electricity in itself can bring large efficiency gains. And, you know, let's have a look at buildings. As buildings account for around 50% of electricity demand, efficiency gains coupled with the decarbonization of electricity production can really deliver major benefits. And there's transport. Transport holds great potential. And in 2050, under the 2DS, projected increase in electricity use to just a 10% share of total transport sector energy demand enables around 50% of efficiency gains in this sector. So it's huge. But that's not to say that the electrification of transport can offer emission reductions in all regions. In fact, in areas with high carbon electricity systems, the electrification of transport may lead to higher emissions. So this is not one solution that fits all. Now, we have developed a tool in ETP 2014 called the Low Carbon Electric Transport Maximization Index, or LETMIX. It's easier to understand, to keep in mind. To analyze which situations can offer the maximum benefit to electrifying transport based on individual country situations. So this is where you can see the differences, also from very, very dark red to, well, very light yellow. It's no surprise that the Nordic region, with its clean electricity system, the LETMIC truly demonstrates the value of early adoption of electric vehicles to decarbonize your transport sector. But ETP analysis also shows that even in cases and in areas where the electricity mix is not completely carbon-free, early deployment of electric vehicles can support a progressively cleaner transportation sector as electricity systems get decarbonized, because that, of course, is crucial. And so we are happy to continue our work with Sweden through the Clean Energy Ministerial Electric Vehicle Initiative to accelerate the introduction and adoption of electric vehicles worldwide. Now, likewise, electrification also offers quite a few benefits in the building sector. And for example, heat pumps for heating, cooling of space and water can not only reduce emissions, but also allow electricity to displace the use of natural gas. And the 2DS electrified building scenario considers deployment of heat pumps beyond 2DS levels for both space and water heating applications in the European Union and China. And under it we see additional energy and emission savings as well as reduced dependence on imported natural gas. So enhanced heat pump deployment can also lead to reduced energy consumption, especially when replacing resistance heating. But this option must, of course, be balanced against others, such as combined heat and power, and the use of district heating and cooling systems. So how do we tie all this together across electricity demand and supply and encourage greater efficiency in all sectors, including transport authorities? So in our view, we need to take a systems approach. Well, today's systems, you can see that it's centralized, it's one-directional, and tomorrow's must be different. And a sustainable energy system will be more integrated, efficient, but also more complex. It will require modern technologies, like smarter grids. It will require market designs and regulations that provide economic incentives for their use. And it will need to take into account the changing role of thermal generation and changes to traditional transmissions and distribution business models as a result of many more typically reliable renewable generators joining the system, including at the household level. So we think action must also be taken to unlock efficiency gains across grids, industries and households. Not just to save money, although that's an important thing, but also to optimize systems operation and investment patterns. And in our view, governments at all levels have a key role to play in putting the right market structures in place so that investors can get on with delivering infrastructure and services. So that means that we also need to see system thinking in a policy sense, so that the role and interaction of government, regulators and the private sector is also taken into account. So in conclusion, I would like to leave you with 3 messages. First, we must actively manage and take a long-term view of how we transition the global energy system. And this requires a breakaway from our current events-based approach that is typically driven by short-term economic and climate events. And secondly, that electricity will play an increasingly central role in the process and empowering economic growth. So how we go about putting the technical and organizational pieces of that puzzle together will be key. And finally, that in order to do all of this, we require strong leadership from both policymakers and industry, and that means embracing a shared vision that looks to the long term with regard to both policy and investments, and mobilizing the necessary financing now rather than paying a much higher price down the road. So I thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to your comments, and of course afterwards Jean-François and I will be happy to take your questions. But now, first of all, I'm going to listen to your comments. Thank you.